MP Khadijah Ameen with us this morning as well to share some of the issues, topical issues of the day. As some of you may be aware, there was a major debate in Parliament last Friday involving piecemeal attempts by the government to amend the legislation and amend the body of law dealing with the municipal corporations and the local government community, particularly two corporations. And Ms. Ameen made a very, very important statement on Friday. And this morning, our MP would take us further on that issue and other issues related to local government and some of the struggles facing members of the community in their local environment. So without further ado, I wanted to hand over to MP Ameen to make her presentation at this press conference this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moonilal. Good morning to our listeners and viewers on the UMC Facebook page, members of the media, those of you who are tuning in, a special good morning to everyone. The only time the PNM shows any concern for local government or municipal corporations in any way is when there is a local government election due. There is a local government election due at the end of this year after the PNM postponed from December of 2022. The PNM has no achievements in local government. They brought a Municipal Corporations Act and changed it in Parliament, but there has been no reform within the regional corporations or on the ground. The citizens have yet to see reform in local government. There has been a constant undermining of funding so that regional corporations cannot even do their work. And now the PNM has come to the Parliament with a bill to make a superficial change, just a change in name, to convert Diego Martin and Siparia from regional corporations to borough corporations. All they are changing is the name. Now, what is a borough? A borough is a concentrated area of targeted, focused development, and is usually a commercial center with supporting services. It requires more manpower, more equipment, and different types of expertise to administrate that area. For instance, in a commercial center, you may have garbage collection every day, maybe twice a day, instead of 2 or 3 days for the week. Your municipal police force will be bigger because you have more to do in terms of enforcement, in terms of traffic regulations and so on. The infrastructure within a borough is usually of a higher standard, so you should have footpaths or pavements on every street to accommodate pedestrians because, again, it is usually a commercial center. You should have properly developed roads, not roads that we see in Trinidad and Tobago now. You will have parks. You should have adequate drainage. You should not have flooding as we see in High Street in Siparia, where the bank has to close because of flooding in Siparia. You will have cultural centers, facilities that would host cultural events, and particularly in Siparia you have the Sipari Mai Festival, and in each region you will have unique festivals that would, in terms of the culture, that you would want to have facilities within each borough to host these. You would have local economic development where you will have small and micro enterprises encouraged within the framework of what the objective is. So for instance, food courts or craft that could be displayed that ties into your culture and your festivals within the borough and the regions. You may have a concentration of education institutions as you do in the St. Augustine area within the Tunapuna-Piako region, and the services to support those education institutions. The size of the electorate in a regional corporation is roughly 10,000 persons. In a borough, it is smaller, it is usually around 3,000 persons. The boroughs can be housed within a region. So for instance, the Arima borough is surrounded by the Tunapuna-Piako region. Even within the Tunapuna-Piako corporation, there's the Tunapuna Town Center. And the question is, why not create a borough there and let the outlying areas remain as a regional corporation? Whatever whichever region you choose, there will still be the tiered system of municipalities where you will have cities, boroughs, and regions. So the PNM has to explain to us why Siparia, why Diego Martin? What method did you use to come up with these two regional corporations? What the PNM has also done is to force regional corporations to do additional work that they are not equipped or funded for. For instance, in 2019, the then Minister of Local Government mandated every regional corporation to maintain schools. And this was after the incompetence of the PNM caused the EFCL to collapse. The regional corporations did not receive additional funding to maintain schools. In every regional corporation, there are regional development plans. And in each corporation, those plans should tie into the national objectives, whether it is food security or manufacturing. Those regional plans for Siparia and Diego Martin, or if they are to be upgraded to borough status or to be adapted, they have to be changed to meet the status of borough. That has not been done. I will share with you that the UNC has an economic recovery plan that would help in every region with economic drivers that would tie into the National Economic Recovery Plan. What is the economic driver to create and to increase commercial activity, to create revenue within a region locally as well as from international sources? What is unique to Siparia and Diego Martin that will tie in to a national economic plan? We have not heard that from the PNM in their explanation on the debate thus far. The practice of having a borough is nothing unique. There are many examples of boroughs internationally with best practices in terms of governance and delivery of services to residents. In New York, for example, you have the 5 boroughs in the city of New York. In London, you have 32 boroughs which are considered best practice in the United Kingdoms. And those boroughs in those respective nations are responsible for providing a range of services to residents, to businesses, including housing, social care, environmental services, and so on. But they are responsible for maintaining a certain standard of living that attracts international tourists and builds relationship between each other as well as with outside parties. The PNM has not told us how they arrived at Diego Martin and how they arrived at Siparia. The question is this an election gimmick to name 2 regional corporations into boroughs and say give the UNC one and give the PNM one? It is clearly following no logic at all. There was no development studies and guidelines for the PNM to arrive at the decision to create these 2 boroughs. There were no consultations that were held with stakeholders. There was no substantive development plans prepared at all. I ask again, will the development objectives in these regions, now boroughs, tie into a national agenda? And where is your national agenda for economic recovery that would include the people and the communities? Will these objectives further sustainability? We want to know whether the plans to upgrade Diego Martin and Siparia into a borough are not just a political ploy by the PNM to later on interfere with the boundaries with the help of the Election and Boundaries Commission. And that takes me to the issue of boundaries. The Minister of Local Government was at pains to explain and to emphasize that the present bill before Parliament does not change the boundaries for Siparia or Diego Martin Corporation. That is absurd, because an Act of Parliament usually decides on the municipalities, and the Election and Boundaries Commission would then intervene and decide on the boundaries for the electoral district, the size of the electorate, and so on. In Trinidad and Tobago, the practice at present is where in regional corporations, the electorate is usually between 8,000 and 10,000 persons voting within an electoral district for one councillor. In a borough, however, in a borough you usually have about 3,000 persons in terms of electorate. In a regional corporation, where the electorate is roughly 10,000, you might have a population of about 25,000 because you have to include people who may be living there but not registered to vote there. In a borough and a city, however, you have a larger transient population. You have people who work within the borough or the city and live elsewhere. You have people who have businesses who may not be resident in the borough, but they are considered burgesses. And all of these persons would require services of some sort, and this is why the boroughs are usually equipped differently, and they also have an increase in terms of the manpower and so on. Has the government had any discussions with the union regarding the improvement in the manpower? At present, you have the NUGFW who represents daily paid workers, and you also have monthly paid workers within these two regions. You must have discussions with the unions with regards to the change in workload and expectation, and you must tell us if you plan to hire additional people, which you should, to deliver the additional services. The workers in the regional corporations, the last time they had an increase in salary was in 2013 under the UNC government. The corporation workers are operating on 2013 salary in 2023, and you are now suggesting that they be given more work. I would expect the union to pick up this matter, the representatives unions to pick up this matter, and certainly if the government holds consultations, they will have to engage the unions at some point in time. While each regional corporation has their strategic development plan, there is need to upgrade these plans, and certainly if any area is to become a borough, you must consult with the stakeholders. I am calling for consultations to take place with the chairman, councillors and aldermen of the regional corporations, but to go further, to meet with community organizations, village councils, religious organizations, the TTPS within those districts, the chambers of commerce, the business owners, the taxi driver associations, the sporting organizations, the cultural groups, the schools, the vendors and any associations that they may have, those in markets as well as roadside vendors. And we must meet with stakeholders. You must explain the benefit of the upgrade from regional corporation to borough status, and allow the stakeholders to indicate their need, and the government has to take steps to come up with solutions for these needs. If the government really follows any kind of rationale in terms of the population, the growth, the density, as was done in 1990, the last borough that was formed was the Shogunas Borough Corporation in 1990. And at that time, Shogunas was a blossoming community where you had a tremendous increase in businesses, you had tremendous infrastructural development, you had a lot of commercial activity, and there was need for planning to support that in terms of creating wider roadways, an increased road network, street lighting, and other facilities to support that kind of development. And that was the rationale for forming the Shogunas Borough at that time. At present, the regional corporation with the largest population at this time is Tunapuna Piako. And Tunapuna Piako actually has more persons in terms of the electorate than both Diego Martin and Siparia combined. It is from the Blanchisseur's North Coast all the way down to Monroe Road in Cunupia, from the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex all the way to the Valencia River Bridge. And within that area you have agriculture, but you also have all of the things that the minister listed as reasons for making Diego Martin into a borough, which includes beautiful ocean, seashore, but you also have within Tunapuna Piako region, you have malls, you have the Piako International Airport, the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex, you have the University of the West Indies, you have a concentration of over 80 education institutions within that close area. You have the Eastern Main Road and Priority Bus Route, the Priority Bus Route being the only emergency route in the country. You have several major companies housed within that region. You have several government agencies also operating there. You have the Magistrates Court and headquarters for numerous other agencies. The question is, why not create Tunapuna Borough? What is your methodological approach? What is your rationale that you are following? If you are to go by population and density and rate of development, how do you justify selecting these two regional corporations out of all? Did you have conduct any study? Did you consult with any stakeholders? That is a question that the PNM has not answered, because the truth is they have not held any consultations. I want to make it very clear. The UNC is in support of regional corporations being upgraded to borough status, but it must not be a cosmetic name change. We want true change and true improvement. The Prime Minister, just before this debate, I think local government hit home for the Prime Minister. He was at the opening of the newly refurbished Skinner Park, and he was lamenting to the media that he almost lost his home in Goodwood Park, I believe, because it was being undermined because the regional corporation did not have sand and gravel to build a box drain. The very thing that the PNM complains about the UNC building too many box drains, they are now facing the result of building no box drains. And coincidentally, the regional corporation that the Prime Minister chastised is led by the PNM, is run by the PNM, and it happens to be one of the regions that the debate over borough status includes. The question the Prime Minister should ask is, how does the legislation fix the issue faced by the Prime Minister in his Diego Martin home by making Diego Martin into a borough? And does the granting of borough status ensure that these will now have the finances to do work? The pain experienced by the Prime Minister is no strange pain to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We have had so many houses collapse in several areas in this country and no response from the government. Very recently in Saparia, we had an incident where the Minister of Works visited a landslip and sought to blame the regional corporation for not fixing the problem in the early stages. The fact is that this kind of neglect and decay in our infrastructure has been happening because of the PNM not providing the resources to the regional corporation to do the work that they have to do. So now that local government has hit home for the Prime Minister, he now knows that a person could lose their home. Mr. Prime Minister, you are so disconnected from what is happening in this country, and that is why you don't know that this is a regular occurrence, because your government and your Minister of Finance continues to undermine the regional corporation. When the UNC was in government, we had many projects completed by the regional corporations, and so you cannot chastise the corporations for their ability to work if you do not provide them with resources. The UNC in government did many projects in collaboration with the ministries so that WASA didn't go and dig up the road after it was freshly paved. We had ongoing maintenance work, development of sporting facilities and cultural facilities, which meant that more young people would be engaged rather than getting involved and recruited by crime and the criminal activity within the area. So local government has a role to play in securing our community. As we see so many young people fall victim to gun violence in this country, as we see the increase and upsurge of criminal activity in this country, the role of local government once again has an important part to play in us taking ourselves away from crime and violence. Our young people, for instance, having activities and programs on sporting facilities maintained by the municipal corporations, street lighting, proper street lighting, leading to safer communities, the maintenance of vacant lots to remove the bushes and debris that would allow bandits to hide and criminals to hide and pounce on unsuspecting citizens to rob them. Women have been raped in instances like this. It happens often in the vicinity of the university and St. Augustine, and it is almost an everyday occurrence in some of these areas. The truth is that the regional corporations have a role to play in reducing crime and making our communities safer. The question is, does making the regional corporations into borough by simply changing their name add or lend to them creating safer communities? With the PNM's approach, it does not. What are our options at this time? The PNM has brought a bill to make a superficial change in the name of the borough of Superior and the borough of Diego Martin, changing them from regional corporations. The UNC is in support of regional corporations becoming boroughs and improving their status. We want this change to be meaningful, not the superficial change that the PNM has brought forward. The UNC recognizes that we now have three options before us. The first option is for the government to withdraw and go back to the drawing board with this piece of legislation. Come back to the Parliament with proper holistic legislation to create boroughs that is based on data, that is based on the reality and where you want your development to go. You can send this bill to a joint select committee where it can be properly deliberated, where stakeholders can be consulted, and the result should be a properly structured legislation that is based in accurate data and that will be reflective of the views of the stakeholders, from the employer to the employee to the union to the burgesses, whether it is residents or business or visitors. The third option is that we could allow this incompetent government to use its majority in Parliament to bring into law a poorly drafted act and to make a superficial name change and to leave it for the UNC to fix it when we return to government. The record shows that the UNC has always treated local government fairer and better. We have had proper representation. We have had offices and secretaries for councillors introduced under the UNC government. We have had proportional representation, which takes democracy further, to select aldermen in regional corporations. Under the UNC, every regional corporation was given a greater allocation. They had more money, more resources, more expertise to do work within the region. The fact is that more roads and drains and bridges and yes, box drains were constructed under the UNC. And the fact is that there was a reduction in flooding, there was a reduction in crime, and the UNC has empowered local government, something that the PNM has failed to do. On behalf of several of the UNC local government practitioners, I want to take this opportunity to commend the councillors who have been going beyond their call of duty, people who have been raising funds, taking money out of their own pockets to fix the road, to fix potholes and drains, because the government has failed to do its duty. Our UNC councillors remain exemplary on the ground, following the directive of the political leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa, to serve the people, serve the people, serve the people. And they have been on the ground and with the people, and so the voice of the UNC local government caucus is really a voice of the people, and it is representative of their hurt and their anguish when houses fall down, when bridges collapse, when people are constantly having to do repairs to their vehicles because of the state of the roads, when schools are shut down and people have to send their children further and pay more money, when people cannot afford the basic necessities. And therefore we are pleading with the government to be reasonable and rational in the designation of boroughs in Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore you can have the support of the opposition, but you cannot bring rubbish and expect the opposition to support it. With those few words, I want to hand over to my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Orobuch East, Dr. Roodal Moonilal.
Thank you very much, Khadijah, the Member of Parliament for the constituency of St. Augustine, for comprehensive appraisal of the legislation that is before the Parliament at this time. The legislation was debated on Friday, but it was not concluded. So that will continue sometime in the future, and I'm sure we'll get the views of others as well in the national community. And Khadijah is absolutely right. With this type of cosmetic piecemeal intervention, that doesn't mean that one box drain will be fixed, one pothole will be covered. Indeed, the Prime Minister, as you said, complained that in the vicinity of his own house, there's a problem there that could not be fixed because the government that he leads could not prioritize resources to help him. And I think we also recall a good point you made, that the last time any significant reform was made to local government elections was made under the People's Partnership Administration, when we introduced the reform to allow for the alderman, depending on the amount of votes a party received. So not just PNM or UNC, any other party that contests a local government election, if they receive votes of a certain amount,
yes,
they actually are allowed representation in the council.
Yes.
And that, I think, is a very important reminder to persons.
Representation.
Yeah, and that was the last significant reform in local government. Nothing has happened in the last 7 years or so in terms of local government election. In fact, that case involving local government election is important for the population to note that is on appeal. That continues. It is not fixed. And at the heart of that is whether there should be a constitutional protection for the right of citizens to vote for local government representatives. And that is an ongoing matter that we'll certainly follow. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, this morning a few issues I wanted to raise in the time allotted to me. A few important issues. I'll just begin by a headline today in a daily newspaper: staff crisis at the DPP's office. And when one looks at this, we recall that the People's Partnership had a comprehensive program of reforming the office of the DPP. This government threw away that completely, and today we are hearing of a crisis where the DPP office has lost staff to the judiciary, essentially. And we are now in a situation where another crisis is brewing in terms of representation in the court in criminal matters involving the office of the DPP. And one can only reflect that had they continued with the reform package that we left, this would not have been the situation today. Another piece of information coming this morning: Senator Wade Mark, as we all know, has been making a statement in Parliament on the Strategic Services Agency. This is an agency that involves itself in intelligence gathering and so on. And let me make the point that the SSA is yet to account for $2.1 billion in spending over a period of time, 2009 to 2021. What is astonishing here is that the SSA job is really to acquire intelligence to work for the overall objective of crime fighting. The SSA is not a McCoy agency because we want to get information to write a book, a thriller novel or something like that. We want information and intelligence that lead to reduction of crime. That has not happened because crime is, of course, on the ascendancy, so crime is not being reduced. But they are spending money without accounting and in breach of their own Act of Parliament, in breach of their own law. And the newspaper article, I believe it's in the Express today, indicated that Section 10 of the SSA Act speaks to the importance of financial accounting and reporting to the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago and to the Auditor General. And this has not been happening yet. They come with a bill, the firearms bill recently, and I'll come to that in a few minutes, to give the power of the SSA to give themselves guns, to allocate firearms to themselves outside of the Office of the Commissioner of Police. And what is atrocious about this is that you cannot account for $2.1 billion, but now you have to account for gun, for ammunition, for license, where you cannot account for monies. And that is what Senator Mark has been on himself. And this morning we'd like to join that call to ask and to insist that there must be independent oversight mechanisms in place to safeguard the rights of citizens and avoid the abuse and misuse of power by officers and by the directorate and the agents of the Strategic Services Agency, which has a very checkered history. As we recall, Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar in 2010 as Prime Minister had to expose and reveal the dastardly type of work that this agency and its predecessor was doing in spying on public officials, spying on leaders of the churches, spying on trade union leaders, opposition figures, and so on. So there's a history here that we are not comfortable with, and certainly the SSA must account for the $2.1 billion that they have expended of taxpayers' money. And it is time that the SSA should be brought to explain themselves, their financial dealings and so on, not only to the Auditor General, but in terms of financial business and their use of firearms and so on. They should also account to the Joint Select Committee of the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on National Security. Just as the Americans have a congressional committee that deals with intelligence, I believe that the Joint Select Committee on National Security should also receive regular reports and have the SSA accounting to the Parliament as the organizations in the United States account to their Congress in that system. So I leave that there and go to another event that is taking headlines. And this matter, at the front page of the Trinidad Express today, the Sunday Express, and it is the $20 million scandal. Don't rush to judge, says retired Justice Stanley John. Now the UNC and the political leader, opposition leader, Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar, did issue a media release dated 9th of February, a few days ago, 2023, in which the opposition leader says, end this charade now. This entire episode has a serious flaw. And this has its roots in a report earlier. Under this government, Keith Rowley, Stuart Young, Alwari and others have been using an institution called the National Security Council as if it is a law, as if it is established by statute, as if it is the FBI or CIA or something like that. And they have been appointing people to investigate, while that is only a subcommittee of the cabinet. The National Security Council is really a subcommittee of the cabinet. Just like the Finance and General Purposes Committee, the Social Committee or something like that, the Legislative Review Committee, you have something called a National Security Committee of the Cabinet. They have been using that as if it is an agency of law enforcement. Imagine they appointed Stanley John, who is now, I believe, the investigator most favored. He did a report on the firearm and so on when they were going after Gary Griffith. He did some report on that. Today, that report, the court held that you cannot even use that report in Parliament. You cannot even lay that report or any piece of it in Parliament. Report done on FUL. Today, Mr. Stanley John, again, he's at it again, now investigating the disappearance of the file. But he investigated a file that disappeared, that reappeared. So the file never disappeared in the first place. In fact, there was a picture, Khadijah, in the newspaper of this nice, pristine, minted folder with what looks like about 3,000 pages and all look like they photocopy. Not one page had a dog hairs on it to suggest that anybody opened it and read it, or when you read a file, always you have little tape and separation markers and whatever you use to look like if you use the file. Mr. John is investigating a missing file that is not missing. He is there along with another person now. We just learned yesterday, not in Parliament, we learned yesterday that a retired police officer from the Special Branch is now an investigator. And Mrs. Kamla Persad-Bissessar has said, stop this charade. There is no need for any investigation like this. We don't know, for example, how was Mr. John recruited? How was Miss, I think, Hines recruited? We pray that she's not related to Minister Nappy Hines, who is the Minister of National Security, who is always napping. So we don't know any relationship there. We pray to God there's none. But having said that, how were they recruited? What are they paid? What is the terms of engagement in terms of payments to these people? Are they doing it for free? Is it a freako job you're doing on the side to help the country? Those things are serious issues because people cannot be engaged by the public purse, and we don't know the terms of engagement in terms of their fees. We don't know who is paying. Mr. John issued a press release on the letterhead of the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. Is he an adjunct part of the Attorney General's office? What is he? How could you be using could I take the Attorney General letterhead and write a report from Dede? You can't do that. I am not part of the Attorney General's office. He is not part of the Attorney General's office, ought not to be using a letterhead. Then the Attorney General retained him. He used the word yesterday. I was retained by the Attorney General. But this matter speaks to wrongdoing, maladministration, at best, if not corruption, at the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. So how could you be recruited, paid for by the Attorney General to investigate the Attorney General? The opposition leader says it clearly in her press release. This is himself investigating himself, and it ought not to be done in this manner. Then we ask the other question. Under what law is Mr. Stanley John and Ms. Hines investigating this matter? No one is obliged to speak to them, to present files and papers. This is not a commission of inquiry. This is not the trying to make a police service or the fraud squad investigating. So we have wrongdoing, clearly wrongdoing, something went wrong, $20 million in damages. But the persons who are now appointed by the Attorney General, they are beholden to the Attorney General. How can they conclude that the Attorney General is the wrongdoer when they are being paid? And Mr. John spoke yesterday about natural justice when it appears that his very appointment is a wrongful appointment. It's improper at best. This should be an independent investigation under the law. If a file is missing, it is government property. It is the job of the fraud squad, the police, to be involved in that and to look into that. They have the requisite technology as well. Today we talk about files, but files are not just physical paper and so on. Files are digital commodities. There's now the digital ecosystem in which you can trace digital footprints and fingerprints and so on. Who received the file? When? Did the person acknowledge receipt? Was the file passed? Everything is in the digital world. And is Mr. John and Mrs. Hines, are they equipped to take that type of investigation as opposed to the fraud squad? So this is a hoax. This is a charade, as Mrs. Prasad Bisesa said. And Mr. John, what would Mr. John and Ms. Hines come up with? We can predict. We have been in town long enough. They will come up to say that the system is wrong. There was a systemic error. And the Attorney General had nothing to do with that. It's a system, and we want to make 10 recommendations, but the Attorney General did no wrong. Notwithstanding, the job of the Attorney General is to meet monthly with the Solicitor General and other officers in his department and to bring files to him and say, could you tell me what are the key matters before the court? And he will know, as Mr. Anand Ramlogan knew before, what are the weighty issues, what are the significant issues we are dealing with in the court, and assign lawyers, get a regular, at least a 1 month update on what are these matters, where did it reach, what is outstanding, what is our liability. That is the role of the Attorney General. But this Attorney General, like the one before, they are busy chasing down UNC politicians. They are busy trying to match their belt to their shoes to make sure they have a nice towel tucked in their front pocket, and they have no time with the real work of the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs. This Attorney General was held by a Miami court to be untruthful. Imagine a court of law felt that he was untruthful. He did not tell the truth. And today we depend on him. We depend on him to monitor major lawsuits against the government involving millions of dollars. So that Mr. Stanley John, I regret to say, no personal, this is not a personal, casting aspersions on the professionalism on the integrity of Mr. John or Mrs. Hines, I don't even know them. The point is that it cannot be done this way and it ought not to be done this way. There's no report you can come up with that can tell us that the Attorney General is wrong. He failed miserably. It was a case of incompetence, negligence, the highest level of negligence by the Attorney General in allowing this matter to have evolved in the way it did. So I will say nothing more on that for the minute and go on to another matter. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on Friday, I raised a matter in Parliament in passing because I was speaking on the amendment to the Firearms Act. And that amendment came from the Senate, essentially Section 10 of the bill, which meant that the PNM and Hines wanted to insert themselves in the Firearms Act to ensure that the minister, politician, can extend the life of an FUL, of a gun license, so to speak. We said we will have none of it. We objected in the lower house and in the upper house. Both the opposition and independents objected, and the government put their tail between their legs and they backed down on that matter. They had to come back in the house to just get approval for the amendment. In that presentation, I did raise a matter that is a serious matter because Mr. Hines was in his flippant manner, you know, casting aspersions, Khadijah, for 7 years now. Anytime they're on the back foot, anytime their back is against the ropes and they have no answer, they talk and they cast aspersions, you know, opposition politicians involved with gang leaders and involved with gangs. And nothing has happened, you know. No police never questioned any member of the opposition of Trinidad and Tobago. None concerning anything to do with gang relations and gangster and so on. In fact, so bad it was, I wanted the population to know, so bad it was, that one day in 2010 they made aspersions concerning myself. Others as well, but concerning myself. I was so flabbergasted and angry that Hines and Stuart Young, I think at the time, would cast aspersions on my character. I wrote to the police through my lawyer, and the police wrote me back a letter through my lawyer, of course. And I have the letter in my hand. In fact, I had to go and read it again after hearing Hines on Friday. This is the letter I have in my hand from the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, dated March 13, 2020. And it is addressed to my lawyer, and my lawyer at that time was, believe it or not, Mr. Israel Khan, Senior Counsel. It says, Dear Mr. Khan, police investigations into the Honorable Roodal Moonilal, reference made to a letter. Please be informed that the head of Special Branch has indicated, based on the information we have, that your client, Dr. Moonilal, is not a suspect of any ongoing police investigation in relation to any gang-related offences in violation of the existing criminal law. Imagine I had to get the police because they were talking as if some of us were involved in, you know, investigations and were suspects in gang-related activity. The police, the Office of Commissioner of Police, sent a letter to me saying that, listen, what he's saying really is that Stuart Young and Hines were talking rubbish. And I call upon Hines today as Minister of National Security, be responsible, be mature. Do not make statements and embarrass the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. When you made statements as you did on Friday last, you are embarrassing the police service, who have no record of this, who don't know what you're talking about, and you are undermining the police work. The police had to write me back and say, look, Mr. Moonilal, we don't know nothing about what Stuart Young and Hines saying, you know. You are not the subject or object of any investigation. You are not a suspect. And we can get letters like this for any UNC MP, senator and so on. Because we are not involved in those business. That is of an earlier PNM. That is how the PNM operate. So moving aside from that, I want a matter that Mr. Hines and the new commissioner should really be looking at. And this is a serious matter that has arisen. You see, and I'll say it in a nutshell. And I will say it in a nutshell. I need a sip of water for this one. There's an ongoing court matter involving a company that is in the business of firearm training and dealing legally with guns, selling ammunition, selling weapons and so on for persons who are lawful holders of firearm users license. There is a company in Central Trinidad involved in that business for 20 years. 20 years. Recently, that company took the police, the Commissioner of Police and other officers and so on, took them to court essentially because they had, last year October, the police descended on the premises of the company under the guise of conducting what is a regular inspection of their books and of their firearm and ammunition and so on. They have been in the business 20 years. October 8th, the police descended to examine their stock and records and so on. Remarkably, the police came to them, and the police is authorized in law at any time to inspect the books and inspect firearms and so on. The police said they were going to seize firearms and ammunitions for what is called safekeeping. Now the police told the business, we want to take all your firearms and ammunition and so on because we want to safekeep it. That was the term. Huh? The police meticulously checked all the ammunition in the possession of the person and the company, so to speak, and they seized it. There's a full listing of what they seized. The police endorsed on the business people FUL permit all the ammunition in detail that was taken for safekeeping pending inquiries. I keep using the word safekeeping. The police wrote and endorsed on the FUL permit the exact amount of ammunition taken. It included the seizure or taking 1,130 rounds of 9mm ammunition. In layman terms, 1,130 bullets or something like that. You could say it like that. 1 month later, the claimant wrote the police, the company, and said, okay, you have undertaken your inspection of the books and everything, all of that done. Could we get back the ammunition, please? The police never responded. Never. That's the next point Mrs. Haywood Christopher should learn. When people write, you write them back. The police has an approach. If you write anything, don't write back. You can't get in trouble. Don't write back. But the court is looking at that process as well. So the company filed for judicial review to say, listen, you conducted a search. You took our arms and ammunition for safekeeping. We want it back. The judicial review claim was filed in December. But an injunction was heard on the 23rd of January, a couple of weeks ago, and the court made an order. I have the court order. Now this is a public document, so this is not a biggie. Court order. The court ordered the police to return, look here, in depth of all the ammunition and weapons and so on, but we're concerned with the ammunition. The court ordered the police to return to the company all the ammunition seized. This is a court order by the Supreme Court, court order. And they have our date here, the 24th of January 2023. The Honorable Mr. Justice Devendra Rampasad has ordered that this business of ammunition be returned. Lo and behold, we are informed that the police came to the business place and they returned arms and ammunition, weapons and so on. But when they checked, having been ordered to return the ammunition, the police have returned 630 rounds of 9mm ammunition, which leaves 500 rounds missing, unreturned by the police. So 500 rounds of ammunition was not returned pursuant to a court order. So of course it becomes now more of a mystery. Now in this country, as you know, we have had a disease of missing file. Now we have a disease of missing ammunition. The TTPS now says, hold on, the police failed to return the ammunition, but the police have not sought to amend the order or vary the order, so which means the order stands. Now if that stands, that means the police is in contempt of the court, a court order, right? The police indicated initially that they could not find the rest of the bullets. They could not find the rest of the ammunition. They took it, yes, they said we admit we took it because we signed the paper for it and we counted. Now I think some of these policemen trying a thing here, they said they couldn't find it. Now the police are saying in a subsequent communication with the company, they think they miscalculated by 500. When they seized the initial amount of ammunition, they think they miscalculated. Now what happened? The police have to go back to SEA classes to try and get mathematics correct. Because how could you miscalculate 500 rounds of ammunition? That is not 5 or 2 or 3 or something. 500 rounds of ammunition cannot be found. And this is a national crisis upon us again. And Mrs. Haywood Christopher needs to get cracking to investigate this. Now please don't call retired Justice Stanley John to investigate this now. Again. Don't call him. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Commissioner, newly appointed, must investigate this by either the Professional and Standards Bureau or another agency of the police that has powers to investigate where did 500 rounds of ammunition go missing. And if it's not missing, then return it today, as you ought to have returned it before, because there is another court matter coming as early as tomorrow to get a contempt of court order that the police has to get this ammunition, otherwise they're in contempt of court. So they're currently in breach of a court order, and the only explanation is they have lost 500 rounds of ammunition. Now 500 rounds of ammunition could be potentially 500 deaths, 500 shooting. Where did that go? At a time when the police cannot account for arms and ammunition, you want to give more law enforcement officers guns, linked to the firearm amendment recently. You want to give them more. 500 rounds of ammunition means 500 lives could be lost, and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service must account for this. Mrs. Harewood, Christopher, you must account for this. That the police are saying now that they miscount, that they cannot find the ammunition that they seized. Hear what? They seized that for safekeeping. Imagine the cruel, tragic, almost comic irony that you seize it for safekeeping and now you cannot find it. So the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service must answer on this matter. It is not a simple matter. It will not go away. I mean, in the old days we used to hear that when police seize cocaine and drugs and so on, rat ate, that in police custody. I mean, I don't know what kind of rat it could be now that could bite up ammunition. But the police must explain this today. And that is an important matter. We raised as well, just for the record, I have in my hand another letter. It is dated to the legal officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, dated 24 January 2023. And it is from the representatives of the company in question. And this letter explains all. I will not, spend time in reading the entire letter, but the letter explains all of the missing 500 rounds of ammunition, 9mm ammunition, that the police today cannot account for. And this letter is also part of a public dossier that will be made available to members of the press if they want. So that we have had this development recently, and Mr. Hines is not concerned with that. What he concerned is Movenam, Couture, Bacchanal. We know it's carnival, but let us not make joke out of serious matters. And he is concerned to stand up in the parliament and so on and talk. Mr. Hines, I don't have the material now, but Mr. Hines was texting Commissioner Gary Griffith, telling him to give this one gun and give that one gun, and they're waiting long and they delayed. And when he got caught with his proverbial pants down, an ugly sight, but when he got caught, he then said, well, he was recommending members of the police and law enforcement and so on to cover up for that. But that matter is a matter where he misled a joint select committee of parliament, and he ought to face consequences for that. The final matter I raised before taking questions involved the ongoing calamity and debacle at the licensing division. And Khadijah, you yourself had put me on to members of the public who were oppressed by this measure, where the license office, to say the story in a nutshell, because again it's a long thing to read, the license office is now embarking upon several strategies to ensure that the law is effective. The law for inspections of vehicle and for transfers and so on, and other business. But what they have done is that they have asked persons, first they do away with the computerized system that led to chaos. People are lining up 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning to go and get their vehicles inspected and so on. When this matter was raised in Parliament, Minister Sinanam, typical of the government, he blamed the citizen. He said for the 2 years that we weren't doing it manually and in person, you should have gone and made appointments and so on. So it's your fault, essentially. Today they are embarking on a project where they are going to use, I think, Arima and Kuva at Obolgan Stadium in Kuva, I believe, and the stadium in Arima, Larry Gold Stadium, to do transfers. Now, this is another point. They are going to move with mobile equipment to do transfers. The transfers involve money. So people now have to take money and move around all over the country to face bandits, because most of the people who undertake this type of transaction do it with cash, not with cards. So I don't know how this will work. The lining up of people at the various licensing divisions and so on has caused enormous stress. But the stress in this has to do with the fact that on the computer system of the licensing division, they have found many mistakes in spelling of people's name, and the registration for chassis number, engine number, and so on. Instead of going out into the community at the garage, where they did inspection and so on, and seeking to clarify and correct, they have people lining up to go now to the license office where the data is faulty and inaccurate, but due to no fault of the people. So imagine today you cannot get your inspection sticker because you name Vidya and they put Vindra. This is what happened. Mr. Amar was given a press conference and he referred to Vidya, to Vindra Coolman Naipal, the heinous murder victim and so on, as Vidya. So Vindra was called Vidya. So Mr. Amar could actually be working in the license office. He could work there too, because that's the mistakes that they make all the time. So your name is spelled wrongly. Your number for chassis and engine, an 8 is looking like a 6, a 5 is looking like a 3. That's a problem. The Trinidad and Tobago owner of the motor vehicle cannot get an inspection sticker. Faces a penalty of $5,000, I believe. And what is the demerit points? You lose points and so on. That could lead eventually to the loss of your license. So imagine, no fault of yours, you get a $5,000 ticket, you get points deducted, you lose your license because the license office system is faulty, inaccurate, improper, and you are to blame, the owner of the vehicle. When you went through a garage, you had inspection and so on properly, that is not your fault. So today we call upon the head of the Transport Commissioner, the Minister of Transport, Rohan Sinanan, please put things in place to ensure that a motorist who, due to no fault of his or her own, cannot get their inspection on time, ought not to be charged, ought not to face a penalty by the license officers and so on, ought not to be paying a fine or having their points deducted due to no fault of their own that they cannot get their sticker. They must put a moratorium now on the penalty, because the license office has to clean up its act. They have to, you know what the license office is doing under Minister Rohan Sinanan? They are making the citizen the victim and telling the citizen, the owner of the vehicle, you go in the garage and go and cure that yourself. Cure that in the garage yourself. We're not dealing with that. But the license office has a duty to correct their own records, not the citizen. You must correct the records when people come there and Roodal is spelled wrongly or Moonilal or something. You correct it in the system. Don't tell Roodal Moonilal, go and find the garage somewhere in Point Fortin and correct it and then come back to the license office. This is what they're doing, and this is wrong. So we will continue to monitor on behalf of the people, on behalf of owners of vehicles and so on, this process at Arima and Kuva to ensure that it is smooth, to ensure that it is user-friendly, consumer-friendly, owner-friendly, and you do not put a burden on ordinary citizens to line up 2:30 in the morning with their truck, their vehicles, to have their name spelled wrong, and they can get a ticket for that because the license office have their name spelled wrong and will not issue another inspection certificate. Those are some of the issues that we are on, and if citizens would have members of the press as well questions on those matters, I'm sure we are willing to take them. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Okay, we just have a few questions coming in. MP Moonilal, is it that you do not have confidence in retired Justice Stanley John and his ability to probe the $20 million fiasco in a fair and fearless manner?
I say again that we have no difficulty with Mr. Retired Justice Stanley John. We are not questioning his integrity, his professionalism. He has an illustrious working career in the judiciary, both in Trinidad and Tobago and abroad. What we are saying is that Mr. John has been used almost as a tool by the administration in a situation where there is no legal framework for his inquiry. He has no power. For example, Mr. John has no immunity. If Mr. John writes a report and he'll speak me, I can sue him for defamation. He writes a report which has to be secret because it cannot be released to the public. It can only go to the parliament, I imagine, because there are immunities there. But Mr. John himself has no immunity. Mr. John has no legal framework to operate within. He cannot summon summon persons and demand papers and notes and minutes. If people help him, it is because, of course, he's working ostensibly for the Attorney General. The other point is he is working for the Attorney General. He is now placing himself as an adjunct office holder in the Ministry of the Attorney General. That is the problem we have with him. It's not his, not even his personality. He's an affable, likable fellow. But he cannot be operating in this way outside of policy and law. That is what we have a difficulty with. Because the National Security Council is not a legal entity. It is not established by statute. It is a subcommittee of cabinet. And that you cannot be using subcommittees of cabinet to appoint people to demand notes and minutes and demand office holders, state office holders, account to him, give reports to him, give statements to him. There are serious problems with that. Under administration of Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, she would have allowed the police to do its work. Now you can help the police. There are ways of helping the police. I noticed that the file on the AMBDC didn't go missing. That will never go missing. Only the file on Naipaul Coleman will go missing. They won't lost that file. But there are ways. Just in the AMBDC matter, they brought SRP Kate from England to help. They brought them from England, spent $45 million to go after UNC politicians. Nothing has come out of that, and nothing will come out of that. In the same way, they could have gotten help for the police to investigate missing a file which is the property of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So again, I want to say there's no issue with Mr. John or Mrs. Hines. We don't even know her. So we cannot say anything bad about her. Or we have no difficulty with her for all intents and purposes. She has been an illustrious police officer.
In light of the revelation that the Strategic Services Agency has spent $2.1 billion since 2009, but has now submitted audited statements, is the opposition concerned that the Office of the Auditor General is not adequately equipped to conduct its functions effectively?
I can say that I have served in this country for 3 years or so as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and that committee, and certainly its chairman, liaise closely with the Auditor General. And yes, there have been issues over the years with proper staffing. Much more resources need to be transferred, both human resources and material resources, to that department. And we have done a lot of work over the years when we were there, 2010 to 15, to give more resources to that department. But in the case of the SSA, they have not sent reports. So it's not a matter of not having enough people to go through the reports and not enough equipment and photocopy machine and computer. Is that they have simply been defying their own act. As we said, SSA is a rogue organization. Could I tell you the SSA came before a committee of parliament of which I'm a member? 1,800 CCTV cameras are up in this country, at which I think only 50% might be working. But you know the SSA, the intelligence department, they only monitor 70. Now we haven't actually the 70 working now. They monitor 70 out of 1,800. They have 80% of their staff is contract staff, not police officers. They want gun now to defend themselves. Ordinary citizens, the government position is ordinary law-abiding citizens ought not to have gun to defend themselves. That's the PNM position. But the SSA, 80% contract employees, they want firearms to defend themselves. Why could they not have worked through the office of the commissioner and request firearms as everybody else? Sure, there may be situations in which we ought to have persons in the SSA, protected. But they want to take firearms now when they cannot account for $2.1 billion. That is the issue.
MP Ameen, the debate on Friday on the bill with the change in the status of the two municipalities, why do you think the government adjourned debate and didn't just continue until the voting was done?
It was very clear to us that the government really wasn't prepared for this debate in terms of being prepared to justify to the parliament and to the people their reasons for converting these two regional corporations into boroughs. Even the Minister of Local Government, when he moved the bill, he was rather brief, which is unusual for Faris Alwari. We were all disappointed that he did not expand and explain and justify properly an account to the parliament. So it seems as though either the Minister of Local Government has not shared with his colleagues the justification, or that the government themselves are really now realizing, based on the arguments from the other side in Parliament, from the arguments from the opposition, that they may really have to backpedal. And I want to say to them that there is no shame in us allowing the Parliament to do its work through a joint select committee, or by withdrawing the bill completely and doing something that is good and beneficial to the country, so that there's merit in it. So please just take your time and reconsider, and let's do something that is good for the country.
Now, the government has repeatedly stated that the introduction of the property tax will address some of the problems encountered by regional corporations in the delivery of service. Do you agree with this? Do you think that the property tax will help the regional corporations?
The government has been using every pothole that they fail to patch as an excuse to bring property tax. They have been using every landslip that they fail to prevent as a reason to bring property tax. Almost everything under the sun is justification for the government to bring property tax. The Minister of Finance some years ago indicated that the percentage of the national revenue expected from property tax will not be significant enough to fund regional corporations. The question is, even with Imbert's very generous projections, that will not fund the regional corporations, but Mr. Imbert has been known to over-project on several taxes and several revenue streams because of the government's failure, again, to manage the whole process of receiving taxes and collecting taxes. So your own Minister of Finance is on record as indicating that the percentage of the national budget to be derived from property tax will not be significant enough to offset serious expenses where local government is concerned. And it is time for the government to stop using that rhetoric of having property tax, and that if you pay property tax, all will be well, and all your potholes will be filled, and all your pavements will be well constructed, and all of your worries will be done because you pay property tax. That is an illusion, it is a lie, and it is a continuous propaganda that the government has been pushing on citizens.
You mentioned the UNC has plans with regard to economic recovery. How does that fit in with local government? What are some of the plans?
Oh, certainly. On the UNC website, you can find the National Economic Transformation Plan. And in this plan, you have several economic drivers that are unique to each region and not necessarily regional corporation. So that there are areas where you have more agriculture and fisheries. There are areas where manufacturing is projected to be the economic driver. So for instance, in the East-West corridor, you have manufacturing, you have several industrial estates and so on, where manufacturing is named as the driver. In certain areas where you have fisheries and so on, you have that as the economic driver. In other areas, you have, let's say, the Cedras area, you have the San Fernando area and so on. You have different things that are organic within the region. And it is for the government, the central government, to ensure that all of these areas are supported. Not only the geographic areas, but each area of economic development is supported. And the regional corporations have a role to play because they maintain the infrastructures surrounding these areas and these amenities. They service the area in terms of providing garbage collection, municipal policing, and other services. They regulate the area through building inspection, ensuring that building codes are kept. They develop the area in terms of the pavements and roads and other bridges and so on that will support commercial activity and education facilities and other things that will be economic drivers. So I encourage citizens to look at the UNC's economic recovery plan that is evolving, that continues to evolve as circumstances change. And you will note that the UNC is currently in talks with several business chambers, and that also will continue to inform the plan as well as our talks with other stakeholders. We encourage citizens to continue to put their suggestions forward as we work together to bring Trinidad and Tobago back onto a road to recovery.
Those are all the questions we have.
I just want to respond to
Sure.
one question that a reporter sent to me.
Okay.
The question is that there was an absence of reference to Justice Nelson in the investigation yesterday by retired Justice John, and the question really is that is Justice Nelson still involved? Now, if you remember the story, first it broke that Justice Ralston Nelson was investigated this matter. Then it came that Justice retired Stanley John was the lead investigator. Then yesterday we heard there was a following investigator, another one. But yesterday was absolutely no reference to Mr. Ralston Nelson. And we ask again, what is he doing? Is he investigating? Is he giving legal advice? Do you need legal advice to a man who is a retired justice? Does he need legal advice from a next justice? Or is this just a charade that they will end up paying monies to retirees to supplement their pension so that they get a 10 days when they retired? What is happening here? This is madness. When the Trinidad and Tobago Police, the fraud squad, is equipped with the manpower, the technology, and they are being paid too to conduct this type of inquiry. So I ask again, what is Nelson doing? Whether it's Vincent Nelson, Ralston Nelson, any Nelson, what are they doing? This morning I want to repeat, because we are closing up now, that the ammunition, 500 rounds of ammunition, potentially is 500 murders, 500 home invasions, 500 kidnappings, 500 robberies. That is what it means in real terms. Ammunition, people hear the term ammunition. Some people can't spell it maybe, but it is bullets. 500 in a bucket, a large bucket, went missing, and that can be used for 500 home invasions, 500 murders. That is the point that people must understand. And the final matter, we wanted on behalf of the opposition as well to extend our very deep condolences to the family and friends and colleagues of Mr. Neil Byam, who collapsed regrettably in the court a couple of days ago and passed. He was well known to many of us in the Parliament because his role in the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs involved him attending many meetings of the Legislative Review Committee in the Parliament as well, and was well known to myself and others as a very kind, professional, affable, and so on, and we extend our deepest condolences to his family and his friends and colleagues. It was a traumatic event in the courthouse, in the judiciary, and I would only say this, that from the reports that came to us, it appears that even the emergency response was delayed, was not in time, was not, urgent, was not done in haste to come to the aid of Mr. Byam when he collapsed. Our information is that the emergency response was far inadequate. In fact, we are told even in the judiciary that there was no emergency kit of some kind, relevant emergency and medical equipment and kit that they could have found in the Hall of Justice to come to the aid of this man. Now, I say this not because we believe one life is more important than another life. This happens right through the country, that emergency services will not respond, cannot respond in time. Again, I do not blame the ambulance, I don't blame the fire brigade, I blame the political directorate that manage those services. And it is now surprising that Hines again is in charge of the fire services and so on. We are told the emergency response was very poor. To this day, lawyers witnessed this event, and I'm told that no one has reached out to the lawyers, the persons present, to provide some sort of counseling, some type of relief, some type of engage in talking. Would you believe even the client involved in that case feels that he's responsible because of my case you came to court, and there's a trauma surrounding this event that is unspeakable. But what we want to speak about is the fact that the emergency response, we believe, was delayed, was slack, was not as prompt as it ought to have been. It ought to have been. So we make no case that one life is more important than another. All lives are important. But it's only when it happens in this dramatic way, in a high office holder, to a high office holder in a major department of state, that it makes the point that ordinary citizens face this on a daily basis, and something ought to be done. So I leave it at that. Without any further questions, I will ask our MP sister Khadijah Ameen to bring some closing remarks and so on.
Well, Trinidad and Tobago, we thank you very much. We know that we are in carnival season. We urge all of you to be safe. If you are on the road, please designate a driver. Please take all caution as we continue to participate in our cultural festivities. If you are drinking, make sure to eat something. We don't want people going and faint and fall down and so on when they go to the panyard or to the fete. Please encourage each other to be one another's keeper. Thank you very much. Have a safe carnival, Trinidad and Tobago.